I'm going to start. I mean, I've always thought, when you hear like a band's kind of first debut album, I always wonder if it's a kind of collection of songs they've had that they've ever since they were kind of teenagers, they've been kind of putting together and slowly building. And
Yeah.
I just wondered, as your first kind of directorial sort of debut as a sort of feature-length film,
Yeah.
was Outpost a film that and an idea that's been kind of with you for some time?
I wish the romantic answer is absolutely, and it was with me since I was 13. But the fact is, the love for the genre was there at that early point. But the story of Outpost really kind of began as a logistical one, which is to say, what would be the cheapest, most coolest place to shoot a horror movie, and what story can I create out of that setting? And so the story kind of began in that realm, and I thought about some other horror movies that I loved as a kid. Of course, The Shining. Although I didn't see it as a kid, Repulsion was certainly an inspiration. But it kind of began there with movies about descents to madness, stories about isolation, psychological thrillers that had some really graphic gore in it, and that's kind of how Outpost was born.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because as soon as it started and as soon as I sort of realized where the story was going and she was heading to an outpost, it just made me
Yeah.
realize, of course, that's the best setting I could possibly think of for like a horror film. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was like we're doing this indie movie. What place would look amazing? And I'm like, it would have a great view, the summit of a mountain. Not, of course, thinking about the logistics of shooting a movie at 6,300 feet. But I think it paid off. And what I like about Outpost also is that I feel that it looks very different than many other movies for that reason. My DP, Frank Barrera, I've known since I was 17. And we both decided that unless we can shoot this movie in an actual fire tower, then let's not do it. Because although I'm happy with the script, it's not breaking any new ground. This is a fairly familiar story. And we thought what would make this movie stand out is where we shot it. And so that's why we ended up on a mountain in Idaho.
I mean, a lot of people always sort of talk about casting, which obviously we will get onto in a bit. But I wanted to ask about kind of finding your outpost. I mean, it's such a big part of this film. Did you have to go and visit a lot of outposts to kind of before you went, this is the outpost?
Yes, luckily, I got hold of a freelance producer in Spokane, and she did incredible work of searching out two or three fire towers. So once we saw the Sundance Tower in Priest Lake, Idaho, I'm like, that looks amazing. This is in 2019. So my DP Frank and I flew there and checked it out and knew immediately as soon as we kind of hit the summit that this was where we were going to shoot. Once we had it, I rewrote the script to tailor it to the specifics of that location and the tower. And then started our relationship with Dan Brown, who was the head of the Idaho Department of Land there, and started that relationship so we can end up shooting there.
I was reading that you've always kind of been a big horror aficionado. I know you that you used to make kind of horror films when you were young with a kind of super great camera. Do you still have them? And can you see shades of Outpost in any of your childhood work?
Oh, not specifically. The ones that I did as a kid had more of a comic bent. Of course, I did a video for Def Leppard's Photograph that had werewolves in it, so that was a bit tongue in cheek. And I also did a short called The Woodland Meadows Massacres. There were some woods in there, and that was about kind of a disembodied hand that went around and killed people. But specifically in Outpost, nothing directly, but I think it was that idea was always kind of stirring in me from there.
I was interested to ask about having the power as a writer director in the art of kind of deception, because I mean, one thing I love about this movie is there's large portions of it where we often question with kind of what we're seeing is happening. Was that just kind of a thrill for you to have that ability to be in charge of all of that kind of that? Yeah,
it was a thrill and it was a challenge because I was playing with POV and states of reality for our main character, Kate. And I also wanted to kind of steer the movie to a place that would have a twist at the end. So without spoiling too much, I've always wanted to do a movie where you kind of were in the head of what turned out to be the monster. And I use that term strictly narratively, and not at all judgmentally on the mental state of our heroine, Kate. And so that was a challenge, knowing how can we kind of play this as a traditional, is this happening or not? And how can we show the audience that actually this is happening? And that's why the state of her mind is getting worse.
Yeah, I was watching, when I was sort of watching this, and I sort of watched that brilliant Australian horror, The Babadook, as well, sort of a couple of years ago.
Great movie.
Thinking about the way this genre in particular is so good at using metaphors to really examine the kind of the real world, and to use monsters to really be a kind of symbol of all these kind of very real, very sort of raw themes in reality. So I just wondered about what you think it is about the horror genre in particular that allows for it to be such a great stomping ground for very real human elements, despite the fact it's often quite supernatural in its kind of final depiction, I suppose.
I think very real fears are able to be dealt with more if you put it in a kind of absurd or fictional symbolism. So the monster, the monster in Outpost really is Kate's state of mind. And areas of domestic violence, PTSD, are very real, very serious kind of issues that the movie kind of explores. And one way to kind of present that in a digestible way is like, well, what if these are nightmares that she's having? And I feel like the horror genre allows people to face fears a little bit more easily through symbolism. I just think there's a lot of heaviness and terror that lives in us, and we just need to manifest it somehow.
Yeah, because I mean, of course, while obviously at that time the character's kind of paranoid, there is a general kind of creepiness we see with the local men in the area. So just scenes in the local super, the way they stare or make weird little kind of flirtatious jokes, and it gives this film a very relevant edge, I thought, and I'm sure women will be able to resonate with. I just wondered if that was something you were keen to explore, and also if you lent on Beth's life experiences as a woman to help understand those we as men will not understand in the same way.
Yeah, it was a challenge to approach the material respectfully, being a 50-year-old white cis male, talking about domestic abuse and PTSD. I thought it was important to very much get into the head of Kate and have the atmosphere, the mood, the music, the soundtrack, and the sound design really reflective of her state of mind, which is a world where most women are dealing with ogling from men 24 hours a day. And not that I have any expertise on expressing that, but I thought it's a little bit easier if we kind of lean into that sound work, that technical work, to really kind of immerse the viewer into what is in Kate's head. I knew in writing the movie that domestic violence was going to be part of the subject matter. I had my stunt coordinator, who ended up having to work on another movie, read it, and she was brave enough to give me to share with me that she was a domestic survivor. She really responded to the script and thought it was reflected in a way that very fairly, and so that kind of helped give me the confidence to kind of move forward with the movie and with the script.
I mean, it's a really complex kind of nuanced role, and I think Beth does a fantastic job bringing.
Oh yes, I'll add that Beth's contribution was quite large, but mostly on the day, mostly when we were shooting. Beth really wanted to. I went to her and asked about the script and asked about some moments, and she helped me with that very much. But her strength was on set and really feeling out those moments. And I don't know if she would say that's not what we feel in this situation. I would probably do this. I would probably just walk away. I wouldn't look scared. I would probably give a smile. So these were very valuable, very nuanced performance points that I think helped sell the authenticity of the female experience.
Did you write the role with Beth in mind for it?
Absolutely, yeah. I knew it was going to since I knew it was going to be an independent movie, and we would be self-financing, and she's an incredible actor. It was going to be in the household for about 5 years, and I knew the range that Beth had. Many people knew her, of course, from Orange, but also some comedy. But I knew very much that she had a great scream and a great look, a great kind of psychotic look that I was able to like draw out. So I wrote that in mind for her, and the other actors I had known for many, many years, Dylan and Becky and Dallas. And so I wouldn't say I had written it in mind, but as we got closer to production, even a year or so away, I'm like, I think this role is for them.
Yeah.
So there was some of that there.
You mentioned about it being in the house. So did you take work home with you at night, or did you almost have to create a bit of a distance between the project and just your regular kind of everyday life?
I want to say that we created a distance, but that would be a lie. I couldn't. And that's really one of the reasons why the movie succeeded. It was quite a burden on Beth, really, in the household. I was obsessed with the movie, of course. She was a champion. When we shot, though, I think I might have saved our marriage by suggesting that we stay in separate rooms, which is what we did. Because I had to kind of go off and decompress and think of the shot list, and she needed to relax and take a bath and look at the lines for the next, and it just would have been too much. So I think that was helpful in getting through those 16 days of a very arduous shoot. So yeah, that's how it went down.
God, you only shot it in 16 days. Blimey.
We shot it in 16 days. We were 8 days on the mountain. We were 14 days in Priest Lake and 2 days in Spokane, Washington. So yeah, it was quite a rush. And the last climactic scene of the movie, there's a big fight on the balcony there. We had to shoot that in about 45 minutes because we were getting to the end of the day. Luckily, the stunt coordinator, Mallory Thompson, and I, and Frank, the DP, had choreographed the fight, both on the tower and at the hotel that we were staying at quite a number of times. So we were able to really run through that quick. We knew the shots that we needed to get. So we were able to do it among gusts of like 30-mile-per-hour winds at the top of the tower that day. It was very exciting. It really added to what you see in the movie and the kind of tension that you see in the movie in that scene.
So recently, I was in for a sort of comedy horror recently called The Blackening. I interviewed a black horror filmmaker recently who said about the impact that Jordan Peele has been for that community in that genre, which is obviously
yes.
But separately, has he also been a great impact for the comedy community? I mean, that guy's basically opening doors left, right, and centre for people. But has he shown that? As someone who's been traditionally in a kind of comedy genre, has Jordan Peele horror been a bit of a? Has it really opened doors? Would you say for your?
Without question. I know Jordan, and when we were doing a movie called Wanderlust, Jordan and I had quite a number of conversations just about horror itself. So I knew well before Get Out that it was brewing in him, and I mean, and I'm still look forward to many more movies from Jordan. Without a doubt, between Jordan and Zach Kreger with Barbarian, those two guys did fantastic work and certainly opened a door for some of us other comedians to indulge just an age-old love of the genre.
In terms of yourself as a director, I mean, I know you sort of did an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So I just wonder how that came about. Did they approach you and say, do you fancy an episode? Or did you say to them, look, I really want to start getting some experience behind the lens? And was it you that kind of initiated that chat?
I initiated it, as well as Stephanie Beatrice and Melissa Fumara, who also directed episodes. And once we got to season 5, I knew that I wanted to direct a movie at some point. And so I brought it up, and the producers there and writers couldn't have been more collaborative and helpful in executing that, because in the episodes that we directed, the writers were kind enough to kind of lessen our on-screen stories for us to really kind of dive into the directing. And it couldn't have been a more ideal situation. You're with a group of people that you trust, a group of people that know the show very well. You know the show, the visual language, having been on it for 4 seasons at that point. And so it was a very, very rewarding experience directing that.
as someone who has performed in comedy and directed in horror and everything like that, do you, if you're, you mentioned being at Fright Fest, you know, before the interview started, and you've obviously, I'm sure you've been in premieres for your comedies as well. Do you get more of a thrill from a laugh from an audience, or a shriek?
Oh, that's tough. Oh, that's tough. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I'm going to have to say laugh. You know, there's nothing like it. But it was wonderful to get, you know, little beats of gasps. You know, there's one moment in the Outpost that provides a particular gasp that I was very happy with. And so I think I prefer the laugh a little bit, but I want to work on the shrieks, and I just need a little bit more practice at that. Maybe we can even them up a bit.
Talking of laughing, I actually revisited Superbad the other day, and I was watching it with some.
Ah, great movie.
It's funny because it's one of those comedies that stood the test of time, and now we're now
Yeah.
enjoying it more maybe even than we even did at the time, just kind of really loving it.
Mm,
I just wonder, because you do get some comedies that they come out, they get that sort of like cult following, and they exist 20 years later, they're still being watched. I'm interested to
yeah.
know, someone who starred in comedies like that, can you tell when you're making it that this is one that has got that longevity, or is it something that even surprises actors?
It definitely surprises actors, and it certainly surprised um, me. The level of Superbad. I knew that I was going to love Superbad. Joe was going to love this movie, and I knew that it was special in that, you know, Seth and Evan were coming from a very personal experience and very personal place, and then on set there was, I don't know, you get, as an actor, sometimes you get a vibe that things are clicking, and it's very easy to kind of riff, to ad lib. It's easy to be on set. It's quite comfortable. There doesn't seem to be a lot of bumping of heads. And that was very true on Superbad. And full disclosure, really, I only worked 6 days on that movie, so I can't account for the entire vibe. But when I was there, it felt very fun. And so, in that respect, it's those are often hints. I'll say this: if a movie doesn't have that, it's very rare that it reaches a level that Superbad did. And I can say that for a movie like Wet Hot American Summer, which had a very similar fun. We're doing it for ourselves. We're making ourselves laugh kind of vibe. And then when you have energies like that, often if the movie isn't a big hit, it does find a very rabid cult base because people pick up on that energy. I guess that's the best most accurate I can answer that question.
Just a couple more just before I go, but I mean, obviously, just an obvious thing to ask towards the end of an interview. But have you got much lined up in terms of directing and acting again? I know, obviously, you're kind of, well, in terms of balancing the two, but in terms of being a director,
Yeah.
are you working on anything at the moment?
Yes, I'm you know, obviously I'm quite in support of our guild and our strike, and in the time that I do have, I am just writing on my own. I had finished a script before the strike happened that we started to shop around. That was a horror sci-fi script that I'm very excited about, and that's more of a creature feature. And that, you know, if the Outpost, if The Shining encouraged the Outpost, then certainly The Thing would be inspiring this next script. And comedy, yes, I'm happy to say that the state is going on tour in the States. The state is going on tour in the States starting next week. We begin in Denver. So I'm excited to leap back into my compatriots and my old college friends and being silly again in front of lots of people. Yeah.
Very final question then before we go. I was just wondering if you've acted since directing Outpost, and if your relationship with acting has changed now you've been a director.
I since, yes, I guess in a couple of shows I had. I think I was always quite aware as an actor of the filmmaking process because I loved making movies and did it as a kid. Since Outpost, um, I've become very aware of how much time or little time the director and the production is often under when they shoot. So I've never been a problematic actor. At least I hope I haven't. You'll have to talk to some of my directors. But I'm very aware now how much goes into a production day and how much under the gun and how much time the whole crew, not just the directors kind of under. And often they want to go home after the end of the day. A quick story, like in the beginning when we were doing Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the first season or two, we would often do ad-libbing and like fun runs, we would call them, where after we got what was in the script, we'd play around a little bit. Well, once we realized that the jokes were fantastic on their own and the writers did a great job, and all we were doing was keeping the crew up later than they needed to be, we started to take the fun runs out of the production day, and just kind of get what was on the page, have a few alt jokes for the editing room, and then move on.
Yeah. The fact you did Outpost and successfully in 16 days suggests you've obviously got a good work ethic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, for speaking to me today. It's been a real pleasure, and best of luck with the release of Outpost. I'm definitely going to catch it and try and catch it if it's on a big screen anywhere near me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being on. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Take care. Have a nice weekend. Cheers.
Take care. You too.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey, you guys!